Just play it cool, boy. Real cool.
Movies have long played a role in perpetuating and commodifying cool. And if you delve deep enough, you may start to notice how many cinematic moments that are meant to convey this concept do so by relying upon the intersection of film, music, and dance. As early as The Jazz Singer, one of the first films to incorporate sound into moving pictures, popular music and film have been indelibly linked. And in the 1950s, Hollywood began to recognize the appeal of marketing to youth via music.
Hey, Johnny, what are you rebelling against?
What do you got?
In those days, cool and hip were often linked to delinquency and disaffectedness.
You are now listening to Rock Around the Clock. Blackboard Jungle deals with an explosive subject, the teenage terror in the schools.
Just a couple of years after the social problem picture Blackboard Jungle helped propel Bill Haley and the Comets' Rock Around the Clock to the top of the Billboard charts, Elvis Presley became immortalized in Jailhouse Rock. The film renders the case for Presley as guardian of cool even more explicit in his performance of You're So Square. Here he continues his hip swiveling while telling the object of his affection that she's so not cool.
You don't like crazy music. You don't like rock and band. You just want to go to a movie show and sit there holding hands. You're so square.
The bumping and grinding, combined with the racy suggestive lyrics of both songs, signified Presley as cool to teenagers and young adults at the time, and dangerous to elders. In fact, this sense of danger is wrapped up in the exhaustively analyzed racial components that factored into Presley's career. As scholar Peter Stanfield has pointed out, Presley was drawn to the cat culture of Memphis in his early years, a demographic of poor white Southerners who found more interest in black music and fashion than in hillbilly culture. While Presley's whiteness certainly wasn't as threatening to mainstream American mores as the many black artists he imitated and admired, he was still provocative, and doing something many whites had never seen before. Just a few months prior to Jailhouse Rock's release, the Fred Astaire vehicle, Silk Stockings, took soft aim at the sudden rise of rock with the parody number, Ritz, Roll, and Rock. The number stands in direct contrast to the Elvis vehicle, a perfect example of old Hollywood exuding uncoolness.
These fancy fops and fillies throw swell affairs. They make those hick hillbillies look like squares.
Ritz, Roll, and Rock is an obvious attempt to capitalize on the appeal of the rock wave while simultaneously poking fun of it, and bizarrely so. Fittingly, the number ends with Astaire smashing his top hat, signifying what would be his second retirement from film. Yet it's inaccurate to equate coolness and youth solely with the rise of rock and roll. Peter Stanfield has also argued that youth culture in the 50s and the 60s wasn't purely defined by an affinity for rock.
They cry, put down pot, don't think a lot.
The Beat generation had a different notion of cool than the cat culture from whence Presley came, but it was similarly connected to delinquency and subversiveness, and jazz, he suggests, was a strong indicator of hipness. Some of the score for West Side Story, for instance, takes on many sophisticated jazzy elements. Take the Dance at the Gym number, where the Jets show off their energetic moves over a swinging, laid-back groove. Later on, after their gang leader Riff and rival gang leader Bernardo have been killed in the Rumble, the swinging jazz score is used to quite literally exert coolness through music and dance. The Jets must learn to compress their anger, frustration, and sadness in order to survive this lousy world. Jerome Robbins' dynamic choreography perfectly encapsulates their struggle to do so through tension and release, shrinking of the body, and bursts of energy. To many modern audiences, a group of dancing young men and warring gangs can seem the complete opposite of cool. But West Side Story certainly has its place in a hip realm of pop culture. Both Cool and the Latin-flavored number America were reappropriated by the Gap decades later to sell coolness and khakis to a new audience in the early 2000s.
And I could certainly use a release.
That retail seller also culled from another cinematic moment in Cool, Audrey Hepburn's Bohemian Dance and 1957's Funny Face. The darkly lit bar, the lithe actress, dressed in all black pants and turtleneck, prancing around carelessly to a chaotic, dissonant rhythm. It all conjures up Hollywood's version of a beat-like counterculture image against the uptight, older generation. Some 20 years later, Saturday Night Fever's counterculture came in another form. The iconic opening scene, featuring John Travolta strutting around New York City to the Bee Gees' Staying Alive, encapsulates a very specific period in time, the height of disco. That moment, along with the ensuing disco scenes, acts as a signifier of a counterculture, the ethnic, cocky male who fails to make good on his aspirations of a better, more traditional life. The dance music that was scorned by many as fluff is a defiant statement against more so-called serious genres.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Travolta has had many musical moments on film that could be considered cool, thanks in no small part to this famous scene from Pulp Fiction featuring Travolta and Uma Thurman as Vincent and Mia. Their dance trades on cool nostalgia in a myriad of ways, including Chuck Berry's song about a young couple defying the odds to the surprise of their elders, and the succession of 60s moves they perform, like the jerk and the twist. It also trades on the viewer seeing Travolta dancing again, reminding us of how cool he once was in Saturday Night Fever and another film drenched with nostalgia, Grease. The dance was inspired by a scene in Jean-Luc Godard's Band of Outsiders, in which the three central characters, Franz, Arthur, and Odile, do a line dance in a cafe. Godard uses the moment to provide insight into their thoughts while they repeat the steps almost instinctively. Unlike Vincent and Mia, the three outsiders are of their time. The music is hip, the style contemporary. But both films find the aesthetic of cool in their actors' composures and interactions. The world around them in both cases feels impervious to their performance.
They had a teenage wedding and the old folks wished them well.
In his 1516 book, The Book of the Courtier, Baldassare Constiglione spoke of practicing sprezzatura, or unflappability, nonchalance. The book is said to have influenced many an aristocrat in its wake. Bob Fosse's Rich Man's Frug in Sweet Charity practices a similar aristocratic cool, as it takes a popular 60s dance craze and turns it into a sophisticated romp. And the first movement of the dance, fittingly titled The Aloof, the handsomely dressed men and women remain cool and composed at all times, utterly stoic whether their bodies' movements are small or flailing. In many ways, most of the examples of cool I've mentioned thus far are sprung from an element of black cool. In the Black Cats musical, Cabin in the Sky, for instance, scenes in the city and the nightclub are juxtaposed with the country. The city scenes exude cool. Men don zoot suits popular at the time, and women wear short dresses, with Duke Ellington himself humming a jazzy number. In the past, black cool was often relegated to small, sporadic scenes or absent altogether from Hollywood movies. But the opening credits of 1971's Shaft are arguably one of the greatest moments of cool in cinematic history. Isaac Hayes' soulful orchestration, combined with the image of Richard Roundtree clad in a brown leather trench coat, came at the height of the blaxploitation movement and Black Power movement, a period of creative flourish for black filmmakers. The song lyrics set up Shaft's identity from the get-go. He's the private detective who ignores authority and does things solely on his own terms.
Damn right.
In more recent years, hip-hop has served to represent black cool in movie musical form, though often still primarily through white characters, as with the Step Up movie series. One exception is Save the Last Dance, where black cool is no longer on the periphery. Here, it's openly celebrated as something for the uncool, or whites, to aspire to. Whether it's the frustrated angst of teens, the aloof gait of hip aristocrats, or the sexy saunter of a private detective, the harmonious coming together of the visual, oral, and visceral have helped to communicate to generations an understanding of cool. There are countless other cinematic musical examples to choose from, and there will certainly be more. Cool continues to be a hot commodity in Hollywood, and music and dance will always be a great way to sell it.